Alright guys, here's another video. It's only my third time doing this stupid thing. I keep screwing it up. But anyway, this video we're doing fuel trims, closed loop, open loop. Trying to see if you guys can understand some of this stuff, because without understanding this, pretty much you're probably not going to understand most of what I'm talking about as far as your tuning goes. And with Ecmlink, okay, I had to write down some of my numbers here because I keep screwing up the positives and negatives and putting them in the wrong place. So I'm jumping the gun here and making sure I don't screw it up in advance. So what we're going to talk about, well, for one, as far as our fuel trims, these are what I'm logging. Basically at idle, combined fuel trim, short-term fuel trim, and long-term fuel trim low. Okay, long-term fuel trim low, that's basically our low airflow at idle. Now you have a mid and a high as well. We're not really going to discuss those in this video though, because we're basically dialing in our idle, and the mid and high won't really apply here. So, but this is basically what I'm normally looking at when trying to dial in my idle as far as my fuel trims. Okay, first and foremost, you have to understand what closed loop and open loop is and the difference between them, and you know how they function as far as what the ECU is looking for as far as they're concerned. So first and foremost, I guess we'll say a good description or an analogy as far as the difference between closed loop and open loop. Closed loop, you can basically imagine trying to drive from, say, Florida to Washington State, and you're trying to figure out how to get there. Well, let's say you've got a map. Okay, you're looking at the map and you have to figure out how to get there. The same thing as ECU looking at the O2 sensor to see what the mixture is. It needs to see where it needs to go, if it needs to add fuel or subtract fuel to get to its destination. Okay, when you're looking at the map and you have your route planned out and you know where you need to go, you quit looking at the map and then you drive based on the calculations that you saw by looking at the map and your directions, and you're driving there. That's the same thing as open loop. Once your ECU is done looking at your calculations and it gets to a certain point, it drops that map or the atlas, whatever you're looking at, and it's going to drop that, and it's going to go based on the calculations that it sees. Okay, if you are, let's say if you are driving and you get lost or you make a wrong turn, you're going to look at the map again and make adjustments to get back on track. The same thing that the ECU is doing. It's going to look at that and make adjustments. And as far as the O2 sensor, it's going to look at the O2 sensor and make adjustments accordingly, whether you either need to be rich or lean. Okay, so that being said, we're basically wanting around 0% as far as your trims across the board. So not just combined fuel trim, short-term or long-term fuel trim, it's across the board that we want to see 0% or at least close to it, plus or minus. Okay, plus or minus about 5%, but I usually like to try and stay around 0. Now, for those that y'all don't know what combined fuel trim is, or short-term fuel trim, or long-term fuel trim is, well, short-term fuel trim, I'll discuss that one first. That's short-term fuel trim, basically what happens as far as an adjustment over a short amount of time. So if you add dead time, remove dead time, whatever the case may be, you're going to see a change as far as their air-fuel mixture pretty quick, and your trims are going to go up or down almost immediately. Okay, whereas a long-term fuel trim, well, obviously that's going to be over a longer period of time before you're going to see a change. Combined fuel trim, pretty self-explanatory. They just make combined fuel trim just to combine the two, and it's just an average of these two. So if you have this one at 0%, or for short-term fuel trim and long-term fuel trim at around 0%, well, obviously combined fuel trim, we're looking at the average, it's going to be 0%. If you have a plus 5% on a short-term fuel trim and a negative 5% on long-term fuel trim, well, you may even out right around 0%. And that's not really where we want to be as far as a plus and a negative to get 0%. We want them 0 all the way across the board, but at least you understand what the differences are. Okay, I'm normally first tuning looking at short-term fuel trim, because any adjustments made is going to be pretty quick. You don't want to be looking at long-term fuel trim because you don't know if that's going to be accurate right then and there. It's going to be a while before you see a change in that. So best thing to do is look at short-term fuel trim and make the adjustments from there. Okay, that'll get you around about where you need to be. Real quick, talking about closed loop. Okay, closed loop, remember, that's going to be the hard part, remembering is closed loop looking at the ECU or not. Well, I mean, not the ECU, I'm sorry, the oxygen sensor. So, and feeding back to the ECU to tell it what it needs to do, if it needs to add or remove fuel. Okay. Simple way to do this. You can log Openloop on your parameters. You can log Closedloop. You can log Openloop if you want to, or you can log both. Kind of pointless to look at both. I just look at one or the other, and to make life easier, I log Closedloop. The reason being is that, simple way to remember it, if you have a 1 with a negative beside it, just think of that as Closedloop. 0 with the negative, I think of a 0 as an O for open. Okay, pretty self-explanatory. Okay, won't go too in depth on that. Basically, you want to see closed loop when you're trying to get a feedback to the ECU, and you're going to be in closed loop or trying to strive for closed loop when at idle or while cruising when you're trying to dial it in. Okay, so as far as your trims, these numbers right here, if you see a plus like over here, that's going to be on the leaner side. You think plus, the higher up, you're going to be going leaner. Okay, think of your wideband. If you're driving along and you punch the gas, well, you're going to be going leaner if you're going this way. If it's going this way, it's going to be rich. You're negative, dropping it down, and you're going rich. For those of you guys that are new and don't know that yet, well, punch the gas. You'll see. If it goes up, you're going to go lean. If that wideband rating goes down, you're going to be rich. Same thing here with your trims. If they're positive, you don't have to have a wideband to figure it out. If it's, if it's a positive, you're going to be lean. If you're negative, you're going to be rich. We want to be right about in the middle, right around 0%. Okay. Now, if we're around 0% across the board, basically, we'll be right around 14.7 for our AFR. And for you new guys that don't know what AFR is, that's basically our air-fuel ratio. Okay. So we want to be right around that. So we can basically just not even use a wideband doing idle and cruise for the most part. And if we have our trims right around 0%, we know we're going to be aiming for around a 14.7. Now, some people may want to shoot for a different air-fuel ratio at idle. Some people shoot for 15 or whatever the case may be, or what's better for them. Save on gas mileage. So that's up to the individual or the individual tuner. But most people out there are usually shooting for 14.7. Okay. Now then, let's flip the page here. As I stated earlier, I kept screwing these up, so I've got these drawn out ahead of time, so that I can't do that this time. All right, so we're going to say we're looking at our stock O2 sensor on this page. We're not looking at our wideband, we're looking at our stock O2 sensor. A lot of people freak out. They see their numbers going up and down like so. Oh my gosh, my number or my O2 sensor is all over the place. It must be messed up. No, that's the way it's supposed to be. Okay. Basically, what it's going to be looking at is for a 14.7 AFR, but it's going to be going positive. It's going lean, and we'll say positive 16.8. And we'll just think of this as the short-term fuel trim. Okay. So that's lean. It's coming back down. We've got a negative 16.8. which is rich. Okay, so what it's going to be doing, it's going to be steady going up. It's going to say, well, I'm going to try and we're down here at the rich section. We need to lean it out. And it's going to get up here, lean up. When we're too lean, we need to richen it back up. It's going to go back down. Up, we're too lean, or we're too rich again. We need to lean it back out. It's going to go back up. So it's just basically a cycle. It's going to be going up and down. Now, if it's flat across, ain't doing squat, then something's up. You can either look for your closed loop parameter. First things first, you need to find out, is it in closed loop or is it an open loop? So if it says this, well, it shouldn't be going straight across. If it says 0 for open loop, well, you can expect this to be going straight across. A couple things you want to be looking for. If it does say this for 0 for open loop, is your coolant temps up to operating temperatures? Is your airflow high enough? Different things there as far as that's concerned. Let's say if your coolant temps are up to par where they need to be, you're adding fuel, nothing is changing. one thing you can do, you can look at if you have a narrowband simulation option, if you have that set up and you have a stock O2 sensor and a wideband hooked up at the same time, simple thing you can do is enable narrowband simulation. If your line is going straight across and then you click narrowband simulation and it does this all of a sudden and it starts cycling, well, we know we're not too lean or too rich. More than likely may have a dead O2 sensor, okay, for the stock O2 sensor. So if that's the case, you may need to replace that sensor, and you may want to simulate a narrowband simulation in the meantime until you get that replaced. That's just one little trick to see if you've got a bad O2 sensor that is stock, okay? So just keep in mind up here, though, it's going to be lean. Down here is going to be rich, okay? And remember, we want to be right across down the center as far as your trims, combined fuel trim, short-term fuel trim, and your long-term fuel trim low. Now, keeping in mind that, you know, if we hit the gas too much, whatever, is going to be going into open loop. That's basically another topic altogether, but basically it should be going on the calculations that it's going off of as far as whatever you have input into the tune. Okay, it's just going to be doing what it's told. Otherwise, if it is closed loop and you have it cycling, basically, at least if it's going a little bit lean, the O2 sensor is going to tell that to the ECU, and it's going to try and add fuel to correct that. Whereas if you're in open loop and you start going lean, well, you're just going lean. It's not going to make any corrections. So it's good to normally have it in closed loop. There are some situations where you may want to lock it into open loop. One reason, sometimes, depending on the case, you may have an idle that, or not necessarily an idle. Well, sometimes the idle may go up or down, but your wideband reading may be going up and down. It's not very smooth, and it's going up and down and fluctuating a lot. You can either sometimes kick it into open loop and lock it into open loop. I believe that's in the miscellaneous tab. And lock it into open loop. Sometimes that'll smooth it out where it's straight across. Okay. Other times, if it's going up and down like so, your O2 sensor may need to be kind of slowed down a little bit in the response rate, because it may be going too fast, feeding back too fast, and it overshoots. So it may be going up. We need to, we need to richen it back up when it comes down. So slowing that down gives it a little bit more time and may give you a smoother line going across. So a couple things to do to try that, and that's in the O2 feedback section in the direct access. But anyway, but basically what I'm talking about, your fuel trims, as far as your trims, rich or lean, whatever the case may be, this is what I'm talking about. One other thing while I'm thinking about it, I see this a lot. And I think this will be the last thing I cover here real quick, and I'll be good to go for this video. One problem I see, somebody may be reading around 12 AFR on their wideband. Okay, they may be good there. Then they go look at their logs, and as far as their fuel trim, again, we're going to be basically discussing short-term fuel trim. Their short-term fuel trim might be plus 16.8. Now remember, plus 16.8, we're lean, okay? 12 is going to be on the richer side. That's down here, okay? Just think of it this way, 14.7 right in the middle. We go say 18. It's going to be on the leaner side. The higher the number, the leaner you are. The lower the number, the richer you are, okay? So what I'll see, their gauge will be around 12. They'll have a 16.8 mixture on their trims, or it may be just the opposite. They may show 18 and they have a negative 16.8 down here. Well, how in the heck are you going to be lean and rich at the same time? Or how in the heck are you going to be rich and lean at the same time? Normally what happens is that you have a bad wiring connection, either bad wiring, you didn't wire it up correctly, or there's a bad wiring connection, or bad ground. Something is going to be wrong there, because basically your wideband is usually going to be correct. So if you see 12 over here, and let's say then also, let's say if you show 12 here, and let's say on your log you're showing, let's say 14.7. Well, obviously there's a discrepancy there, so we've got to figure out what that is. If you have AEM, good luck to you. You either have bad wiring or it needs to be calibrated correctly, because AEM sucks. For anybody that doesn't know my feelings on it, it sucks. So case in point, I won't go into that too much, but go with another wideband, Innovate, PLX. There's plenty of different ones to go out to use out there, unless you're using an AEM analog, which that one's fine, no problems there. But normally, if you do see a discrepancy there as saying AFR being 18 and your fuel trim showing the opposite, normally there's going to be a problem there with the wiring or connection or ground. So just remember that if you see that, and I do see it from time to time. So right now, that's about all I can think of. If you have any questions, feel free to holler at me. Y'all know how to contact me. Y'all have a good one.